Hi class, my name is Daniel Dropic, and I'm going to show you the app that I created to explore the racial disparity and socioeconomic data within Baltimore City. So a little bit of background on the topic. Baltimore's black population has a rich history that dates back to the city's founding in the early 18th century. This population played a large role in shaping the city's identity from the early days of slavery and all the way through the Great Migration of the 20th century. And despite their significance to the city, they have always experienced a variety of social and economic challenges, such as racial segregation, high rates of poverty and crime, and limited access to quality education. So this project aims to explore the disparity in economic prosperity between Baltimore's black and white communities and visualize the extent to which racial segregation persists to this day. So start off, I'll show you the data layers that I used for this project. So first, here we have the white population. It's a little hard to see on this base layer, but you can see these white circles which indicate the amount of white people in each neighborhood. And same thing with this layer, which shows the black population in each neighborhood. So the bigger the symbol, the higher percentage of black people live in each of these neighborhoods. And then I have a median household income layer. So the darker the block, the higher the median household income. I have percentage of households living in poverty. So the darker the symbol, the higher the poverty. And then finally the unemployment percentage. So same thing, the darker the polygon, the higher the unemployment. So I'll walk through some of the features I have included on this map. So I'll start with this swipe tool, which can highlight the difference in racial breakdown of each neighborhood. So I'll just do it real quick. So this is showing the black population in each neighborhood, and then as you swipe, it will show you the white population. And so as you would expect, there's basically an inverse relationship. The more black people, the less white people, which is no surprise. But what is interesting is looking at the areas where there is a significant proportion of black people, or where there is a significant portion of white people, and and how that corresponds to these economic data points. So I'll take this as a chance to walk through some of these bookmarks. So I have Western Baltimore and Eastern Baltimore, which are two areas that have historically experienced a lot of um, what we would call gentrification. So especially Eastern Baltimore recently, there have been a lot of project home demolitions. Most recently, the Perkins homes were demolished. And that's essentially, if you don't know, public housing provided to low-income families and individuals. And those communities happen to largely be, or be largely black. And when these homes are leveled, it brings a myriad of economic problems to those communities. And as you can see here, sorry, let me turn this back on. As you can see here, there is a very low white population and a very high black population in Eastern Baltimore, and that also is an area with very significant unemployment. So here we see it's 16%, and if we go ahead and put on any of these other layers, so here we have percentage of families living below the poverty line, we have 41%, which is extremely significant. If we just go down here to Fells Point, 3% under the poverty line. And then lastly, we'll do median household income. So here we have $24,000 in eastern Baltimore, and down here we have 134,000. And as you can see, the black population is vastly different in those two areas. And pretty much everything I just said also applies to western Baltimore. All of these neighborhoods here, so it's going to be Greater Rosemont, Harlem Park and Sandtown Winchester, and Druid Heights, all experience extreme socioeconomic problems. So you just saw the unemployment numbers. We'll look at the poverty. So 43%, 30%, 20%, very significant. And then very low median household incomes in these areas, and they do happen to largely be black populations. And then we will go down to Fells Point and Federal Hill, which are kind of like new up-and-coming areas. There are a lot of young people living here. It's where I live, right around here. And as you can see, the racial breakdown of these areas is very different from the last two we looked at. And as you can also see, unemployment numbers are very low. There are not a lot of unemployed people here. Extremely low poverty levels, 2%, 3%, 3%. And extremely high household income, all over around $100,000. And this is something that you can see kind of all the way up the center of the city, and I think that this kind of did a good job at visualizing it. So if you turn off this, you can see that 83, this is like the major highway in Baltimore that connects you to all the different areas. That's kind of like the breaking point of this. Like anything east of 83 and kind of immediately to the west is doing pretty well. Sorry. There we go. Yeah, so you can see, this line is kind of where 83 is. And if you look at the difference in racial demographics here, you can see there's a lot of white people living in that sweet spot in the center and not very many living on the periphery. And this central area does well in all three of these metrics. They have high household income, low poverty, low unemployment. And so another functionality of this app that I included is, let me turn off this swipe, these filters. So we can look at household income under 50,000. So let me make sure this is enabled. And then let's flick this on. So here we have only neighborhoods with a median household income under $50,000. And as you can see, many of these areas have large population, or a relatively high proportion of black residents. And the areas with a lot of white residents generally are outside of these neighborhoods that are making under 50,000. And so conversely, if we were to enable this filter that shows household income over $100,000, so there's not a lot of neighborhoods here. It's going to be like Roland Park, what's this one? North Baltimore, Fed Hill, South Baltimore, and Canton. These all have very high white populations and very low, if any, black populations. And then, so we can flick this off. And if you want to just look at areas with extremely high black populations, so that's 95% or higher, you can kind of just get an idea of what those neighborhoods are dealing with. So, you know, some are doing better than others. We have Greater Mondawmin with 10% poverty, which still is pretty significant compared to something like Canton, where earlier we looked at 2%. But yeah, these extremely high proportion black neighborhoods generally just are the ones that are not doing well. And if you want to look here, these dots show where there are less than a fifth of the population is black, and those are the areas that are doing pretty well. And then finally, we'll look at this, which is pretty much the same as the household income layer. And we can even do this, and you see there's just quite a bit of overlap. This area up here, east or west of Druid Hill, is doing better than most, but it still is a pretty serious relationship. And one other functionality I included is find neighborhood. So you can go ahead and search for a neighborhood. So I'll search for Fells Point, that's where I live, and it'll tell you median household income, percent of families below the poverty line, and unemployment percentage. And then I also have this add data feature if you want to add your own data to explore. And so that's just about it. I guess the conclusion of this is just kind of, it's pretty shocking to see that a modern city like Baltimore is still, in all intents and purposes, racially segregated. The reality of being in one of these more white neighborhoods is just completely different than that of one of the more prominently black neighborhoods, and it's just something that I think people might not realize. I think a lot of people know that there is a problem, but the significance of the problem is far greater than I think it gets credit for. I think this central corridor really highlights it. It's just basically the only parts of the city that consistently do well, and they are just overwhelmingly, you know, like very white. And I think that moving forward, the city needs to kind of address this problem and provide some assistance for these neighborhoods that aren't doing so well. And that's it. Thank you.